A very good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to this policy dialogue organized by the European Policy Center to discuss about the state of affairs and prospects in the normalization of relations between Belgrade and Pristina. The two sides have been engaged in EU-mediated talks for more than a decade now, in a process that to this day continues to ebb and flow with important consequences, not only for the EU membership aspiration of Serbia and Kosovo, but also for regional stability. At a time of great geopolitical fermentation, when security and peace can no longer be taken for granted, and when unity seems essential to survival, diffusing long-standing regional tensions emerges more important than ever. So where do we stand in the effort of softening the enmity between Belgrade and Pristina? Is the dialogue advancing constructively or at all? If yes, in what sense? If not, why not? And with what implications either way? To help us make sense of where we are and where we might go from here on this highly sensitive but vastly important subject, I have two distinguished experts here present. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Donika Emini, Director of CiviKos platform and member of the Balkans in Europe Policy Advisory Group, and Dragisa Mijacic, Director of the Institute for Territorial and Economic Development. Thank you both very much for agreeing to share with us your experience and expertise at this event. We will first hear from our panelists, and then I will open the floor for questions and comments from our participants. All of you in the audience are, of course, welcome and encouraged to send us your written questions at any time during the meeting using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. Alternatively, you can press the raise your hand button and wait for me to allow you to intervene live when the time comes. And with that, let's get started. I want to begin with one question for both our speakers, asking them to tell us how the dialogue looks at present from their respective perspectives. Dragisa, do you want to go first and maybe try to give us the Serbian point of view? What is Serbia's position and how do you view the dialogue and its prospects?
Thank you, Corina. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this event. First, I believe that I should introduce myself a little bit more. My name is Mijacic. I'm a director of a think tank called Institute for Territorial Economic Development. We are a regional think tank having an office in Belgrade and in northern Kosovo. Me, myself, I'm a citizen of both, of Kosovo and Serbia, originally coming from northern Kosovo. So I have Kosovo citizenship, but I also have a Serbian citizenship by birth as well. I'm also a coordinator of the working group for Chapter 35 of the National Convention to the European Union. National Convention is a platform of civil society organizations who is helping the Serbian government and European Union on the EU enlargement of Serbia, and I'm coordinating the work of chapter related to Chapter 35, which is directly connected with the Brussels dialogue. In my working group, I have 19 civil society organizations, which are the most prominent organizations from Serbia and from northern part of Kosovo, who are dealing on an issue of a dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo, but also we organize different kinds of strategic debates with representatives of the government, including the president of Serbia, who is leading the process of dialogue, but also we organize meetings with diplomatic community, EU representatives, including Ambassador Lajčák and many other actors. We also provide different kinds of analytical background on the dialogue process, monitoring the achievement of the agreements on one side, on the other side, providing some forward-looking perspectives for the future dialogue. So when it comes to a dialogue itself, well, I can speak on the perspective of Serbia, but also in the perspective of Serbian community from northern Kosovo, from where I'm coming from. And we are in a really sensitive moment, saying that we can have a really difficult conversation about the past, or we can be more optimistic and speaking about a better future in this dialogue. I mean, we are now at the moment where the conflict is really highly feasible, especially in the northern Kosovo, considering the problems with the car registration plates and the deadline that was put by Kosovo government by the 31st of October. We had a representative, we had Miroslav Lajčák last week in Pristina speaking about that, probably asking for delaying the process of registration for a certain period of time. Today we had Escobar. Actually, yesterday he was in Pristina also asking for 10 months delay on this very issue. On the other side, we can also speak about some new initiative provided by Scholz and Macron, their representatives, about forward-looking possibilities to reach the agreement. If you look Escobar from yesterday, he said the final agreement is feasible in the next few weeks. We are not talking about months or years. He said it might be happen in the next few weeks, and having in mind that it was asked for an extension for re-registration of these car plates for the next 10 months. So somehow my prediction is that they're expecting to reach some sort of the agreement within this 10 months period. So if I have to say a few words about the current happenings in the north, and if we are talking about the dialogue itself, we don't know what is the dialogue about. And if we look from the Pristina's perspective and from Belgrade perspective, they're completely different angles in which they're tackling this very issue. Well, if you look from Pristina's perspective, for them the dialogue is only about recognition getting from Serbia, and it has been all across all governments as of 2013 when the Brussels dialogue was signed. So in principle there is nothing to talk about it. There is only a recognition from Serbia, and more or less the Pristina side is reluctant in implementing all the agreements that has been reached through a dialogue, because most of these agreements are actually in the hands of Pristina to implement. And I'm not talking about only Association of Serb Majority Municipalities, but also all other agreements, meaning the energy agreement, meaning the judiciary agreement, meaning the police agreement, etc., etc. So in a sense, everything that has been agreed in Brussels, vast majority of that has to be implemented by Kosovo government. On the other side, for Serbia, the dialogue is, if we are talking about 2013, there was another dynamic, now is another dynamic. But there, for Serbia, the dialogue is about, let's talk about everything, because we haven't been agreeing on Ahtisaari's agreement, neither on the initiative before Ahtisaari or after him. And now they are trying to make discussions about really different issues. One issue is collective rights of the Serbian majority, of the Serbian community in Kosovo, which is perceived to some stage to be protected through Association of Serb Majority Municipalities, but on the other side, it hasn't been solved with the Ahtisaari's proposal that is already in Kosovo constitution. So then the other issue is the issue of the church and the status of the church. The third issue is the property issue between Kosovo and Serbia. And the fourth issue is the formal recognition and the relationship between Serbia as a state and Kosovo as a state. So Serbia put really a lot of hopes on a plate. On the other side, from Kosovo is it has been shown that many of these topics are really difficult to talk with. So in that case, we really cannot make a strong agreement between two sides, even about what they're going to talk about within this dialogue perspective. I have to say that if we come back to 2013, the whole deal was Serbia will recognize Kosovo and will join the EU. So that was kind of an initial framework for the agreement, and within that framework, within that framework, we had a really positive momentum in reaching the agreement. So it was first Brussels agreement, and then it was technical agreements up to 2013, and then it was first political agreement, which is Brussels agreement, and then several others. And then we have Jean-Claude Juncker in 2014 saying there will be no enlargement within the framework of this commission. So if we see the dynamic as of 2014, in 2015, they renegotiate some of the agreements that has been reached in 2013 and 2012. In 2016, it was a judiciary agreement that was signed. And as of 2016, today is 22, for these 6-7 years, we don't have any agreement reached within Brussels dialogue. Of course, we have this roadmap that was signed recently, but that is not the agreement. That is, again, we are again talking about what has been already reached in 2013 and 2015. So in that sense, you see the whole dynamics of the process going up and down. And now when the EU enlargement of Serbia, but I will say also of the Western Balkans, is not on the plate, whether we can have the momentum to reach the agreement, and what kind of agreement we can reach within this very specific framework. So even if we are talking about the dialogue itself, it is split in two parts. One part is more talking about conflict management and conflict solving. We had many incidents in the last year, let's put in a year. And then we also have this forward-looking, but this forward-looking without EU perspective of the Western Balkans, it is, I really don't see how it is possible and what will be the benefits of either side to sign some sort of the agreement within this framework. So I will stop here because this is my 10 minutes, but I hope we will have another round to a little bit more elaborate what I was saying.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm just wondering if you can give us a little bit more detail about this Franco-German proposal, because I mean, you painted a picture that is, at the end of the day, rather pessimistic, or at least a picture in which the two sides are not really talking to each other, but past each other. And so and at the same time, you refer to this Scholz-Macron proposal as something that is forward-looking and somewhat positive. So I wonder, how do we reconcile it, or how come that you see something potentially positive in this initiative?
Well, I have to say first that we are really more closer to a conflict to the north, or in the north of Kosovo, than to a peace signed by this Scholz-Macron agreement. And I've been in northern Kosovo during the weekend, and situation is really fragile. So I don't want to be very pessimistic, but it is on the edge of conflict that might happen every day. And on the other side, Scholz-Macron initiative is the only one initiative that we had as since 2018, when we had this initiative for land swapping or delineation of the border, etc. So this is the only one initiative that goes in some direction the two sides might reach some of the agreement. We see a huge diplomatic activity from various sectors, especially from Queen countries, including Americans, supporting this initiative and pushing two sides towards some sort of the agreement. But I also have to say that we haven't seen this paper. Everyone is talking about, there was some press releases which was demanded by both governments. So probably it's not that paper, but something is known by two sides. They are so far not so much negative about it. They are ready to consider, or they see it positively. So I think the paper, although I haven't read it, the paper gives a good perspective, because we really need an agreement. Without the agreement, we will not have the peace in the Western Balkans. So any sort of the initiative, especially initiative coming from two largest countries of the EU, it has to be welcomed by all actors.
Okay, we'll come back to some of these issues, but I first want to also allow Donika to come in and give us her perspective. Is the perception from Kosovo different?
Yes, completely different, and that's the problem. And speaking with even colleagues from civil society, understanding how barricaded and how different of the difference between perspectives about the process is rather concerning, because the track 2 should be the one that actually pushes track 1 towards a solution, creating a conducive environment. Track 3 and track 2 usually in negotiations are the ones that are actually helping the track 1 to create conducive environment for the agreements to actually be sustainable and to be implementable. And what happened in Kosovo, but also in Serbia, is completely different. The track 2 and track 3 often engaged in populist narratives of the governments, basically backing these narratives rather than creating a different story which would help the countries to move forward. And this is probably one of the biggest problems. And this is something that I think a year before, when I was in London, we had this discussion with Lajčák and Escobar with you. You were facilitating it. And my intervention was exactly something similar, to support track 2 and track 3 in order to create a conducive environment for not just the process, but also agreements to be implementable and the process to be effective. Yes, unfortunately, this is not just a Kosovo-Serbia issue. Obviously, by the intensity of visits that we are having both in Kosovo and Serbia, we understand that this is not just between Kosovo and Serbia. This is not just between Kurti and Vučić. This is bigger than us. And you have mentioned the fact that we are living in different geopolitical circumstances, which might push the West to actually close the security soft spot that we all feared after the Russian aggression in Ukraine would occur in the Balkans. And we're not talking here about just Kosovo, and particularly in the northern part of Kosovo, but also about Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was brewing conflict before Ukraine. We know that in November last year, before the war in Ukraine, they were already having problems, which also triggered even NATO to actually increase the number of troops and presence in Bosnia. So this is perfect circumstances for stabilitocrats like Vučić, who constantly has invested in insecurity pockets and this instability pockets in Bosnia, but also in Kosovo by maintaining this parallel institutions. I mean, I would agree that also, it takes two to tango, but it's not just the responsibility of Kosovo to implement the agreements. The agreements actually included both parties, and even if it wasn't directly Serbia, it was the Serbian presence in the north that actually made it even more relevant, and its presence and political will of which is even more relevant for these agreements to actually be effective. Unfortunately, after the 2013 agreement, there was no political will to actually implement or move forward. It was, for Serbia, it was very, very convenient because in 2011, with the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia, the candidate status was there. And then with 2013, the accession negotiations were open. So basically all the integration path of Serbia was intentionally linked to the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia because it shifted the attention from reforms, and it's evident. I mean, if you look at how the democratization trajectory in Serbia actually moved from 2013, you would actually get the answer. It was exactly, in 2013 that, all this democratic resilience that we had built in the region started backsliding, and it started, of course, with Serbia, and then with other countries, and unfortunately, then we tried to sort of gain territory with democracy, but then we only had like initiatives here and there sparking, but not really sustainable. And obviously, it is very easy to sell stability to the EU, especially now with Ukraine. And that's my biggest fear and our biggest fear in BIPAC when we met immediately after the Russian intervention in Ukraine was, look, now we are going to talk more about stability than democracy. And that is godsend for autocrats who have actually built and continue to hold their authoritarian grip using stability card. Unfortunately, this was also the case with the new government in Kosovo. For the circumstances in Pristina and in Kosovo generally have changed because differently from other countries in the region, there was a change in political elite, which is to be celebrated. And it happened through democratic elections. But what we had is that we had a complete shift of political elite with bringing to power two people who have never been part of any processes before, have no memory of the dialogue, and have not given memory, have been given memory of the dialogue when they entered the process. I recall when Kurdi government in the beginning took over the dialogue, they didn't even know beyond what we know about the process, but beyond the documents that you could access online and beyond the things you could get in the media. So it was basically Lajčák was the one and the EU member states briefing alongside some, Houthi government with a very small document that was left for Kurdi as a legacy of the dialogue. So then we have new circumstances in Pristina because we had a government that actually came to power, a person who came to power saying no to everything that was related to Serbia and to the dialogue. So we needed time to basically get comfortable and get Kurdi in the process. Starting from dialogue is my 8th priority to dialogue now is a priority and has to be discussed. And then, of course, what Kurdi did was that it only continued dealing with the issues that were left open by Houthi government, and there were the energy. And by the way, it was the roadmap was sent from Pristina, from the government of Kosovo here to Serbia. It was sitting in Serbia for so long until Vučić made the step. It's going very slowly, and we are facing an energy crisis in the winter, and it's not going to be easy. So that's another issue that probably Escobar and Lajčák are very much concerned about. That's why they're here. And second is the car registration plates, which was something that we were dragging on for the next in the past 2 years, on and off, trying to find a solution in that regard. And all of these are part of the technical dialogue, which was taking place from 2011 to 2013. Which brings me to my next point. The next point is that no new issues are being opened. We are just recycling whatever has been either agreed on, and we are just adding more elements, pretending that we are in a way doing something in the process. And what we are doing is that, apart from what Escobar said yesterday in Pristina, which was very strong, what we are doing is conflict prevention exercise, which means that we constantly are, foreseeing the next crisis, upcoming crisis, and we're trying to take, ad hoc steps, which would potentially prevent these crises, but not offer a long-term solution. And now is the time for the long-term solution, because I don't care, actually, and this is something that I would openly say in Pristina, here in Kosovo as well. I don't care about car registration plates and the 10-month, deadline, because that's it. It is completely irrelevant. It is irrelevant to even talk about it. And you know why it's irrelevant? Because it's a technical issue. Because these technical issues are heaven for Vučić, because we will waste time, months and months, dealing with technicalities without him being under pressure to actually deliver in relation to Kosovo, because constantly it looks like Kosovo is not willing to deliver, but there is no political will from Serbia to do so, because what's in there for Vučić to actually solve this issue? This issue will only diminish his political power, his role of instability causing to then offer stability. We know the stabilitocracy cycle, and it loses the leverage of in between the West and the East, because that the Kosovo issue was the one that actually kept Russia actively in the Balkans, and successfully. So without the EU integration there, which Dragisa mentioned, there is no enlargement, and mentioned 2014, which basically feeds my argument from 2013 and onwards, everything going down the drain. It's because there is no enlargement. And for Serbia, there is, what for? So if there is no political leverage of the EU being used strategically on Serbia, it is very unlikely that we will have something. Kosovo, of course, has to play its part, and we are having a new government that has to start a discussion on the association, definitely, because this is something that has been signed, has been ratified in the parliament. Either go to the parliament and say, like, look, we are annulling that agreement. That's one of the mechanisms that they can use. Or like to open the dialogue, not just with the local Serbs, but also with us, to see how do we create something that will provide the rights for minorities, especially the Serbs who live in Kosovo. The thing is that we believed back in 2013 that the Lista Srpska, the Serbian political party that actually brought the Serbs in the Kosovo institutions, will bring that. It didn't, because Lista Srpska then monopolized the political representation of the Serbs and completely detached from the people, from the actual, Serbs needing to be represented and their interest to be represented in Pristina here in the government. And we are fearing that the association, again, is not going to elevate the rights, is not going to improve the lives of the local Serbs, but is going to provide yet another political mechanisms for Vučić to use to make Kosovo internally dysfunctional, which is also the case in Bosnia, similar case. But Kosovo, of course, and Bosnia cannot be compared, and we don't want to compare that because it's completely different circumstances. So that's why, the only way to actually look forward is to use the political momentum that is being created to detach Serbia from Russia, because, the chapter 31, we are having the first backsliding for Serbia in country reports. And that is related to alignment with Russia and hesitation to actually align with the EU in relation to Serbia with the sanctions. And then to do this detachment of Serbia from Russia and provide for the country incentives for democratization, but also really try to find a way for enlargement to work. So this is also a part that the EU has to do. And really stop talking about technicalities and recycling things from 2011, because we are just going to help engagement in, this cycle that is convenient for autocrats. But look forward to, hopefully, what Escobar was saying, have an agreement that is going to really address the elephant in the room, and then bilaterally to discuss all other issues that might be technical between Kosovo and Serbia. And this is the only way to move forward. If we don't do this, we're not going to move forward. We will be sitting here 10 years after, probably looking older, or with different researchers talking about the same problem over and over again. And things in Kosovo, nor in Serbia, are getting any better for the citizens. I mean, we see that people in the Balkans generally are demotivated to continue our battle for democracy here. We either should take the streets where we started back in 2000, or continue pushing the systems to go towards democratization. If these do not happen, I'm afraid that we will all give up at some point and we'll just leave the region, and then we leave it to autocrats to enjoy it with their authoritarian regimes. So it is now make it or break it. And Ukraine should be a lesson learned for all of us, especially the EU, and on the urgency to actually act properly and not drag feet just for the sake of keeping a process that is dead alive.
Yes, indeed, Donika. Do I understand correctly that at the end of the day, a lack of transparency and accountability are actually undermining the process? And if so, how can we ensure accountability in your opinion?
Lack of transparency. I mean, because it's so interesting that I repeat something so many times that I cannot even stand myself when I listen to myself saying it. Transparency is number one, and my biggest, because I know it's a negotiations process. Even in when Greece and North Macedonia did their agreement, it was not really being 100% transparent. We were, in the circles. I mean, our friend is Nicola, and he was in the process. We did not know how the name is going to be, but the messages that the leaders had sent by having joint press conferences, by sending the vibe to people that, look, we are handling something and we are not being hostile to each other, it really helped. In this case, we really would need to have a process in which we would at least have some sort of information and to work with. And this was something that we asked for like 10 years. And then we have a government in Kosovo that actually was with us as civil society, pushing previous governments for transparency. And what happened this time is that when Kurdi was in Brussels, there is an agreement signed. We don't know if it's an agreement. No one has seen the text of the agreement. We have seen a tweet. That's not even, we don't even know. I mean, Vučić said the agreement does not exist. It's just like a verbal agreement between the parties to actually, move on on that particular element. So now we don't have a text of agreement. We have just a tweet. And then after a week, we had like 2 press conferences, Vučić whining and complaining as if, it's the end of the world. And then Kurdi, on the other side, completely with different narrative of us being recognized because of the ID. I mean, I could travel to Serbia with an ID since 2011. Now I don't get the put for that, but that doesn't really make any difference. So it's just like, it's not even incremental approach, it's decremental. So one of the steps is, not just transparency, but also being inclusive in the process. And I don't know about Vučić because that's probably something that Dragisa can cover. But seemingly there were some initiatives, but Vučić style for internal dialogue. But in Kosovo, here in Kosovo, we don't have that. I mean, I was expecting at least Kurti to start this dialogue internally, not with the Serbs, because they keep saying just with the Serbs, with all of us, Serbs included, to see how we can, move the process forward, or even if there is no sharing really of sensitive information, just building the cohesion and creating the circumstances and the debate internally for that process to take place would have helped a lot. It is not happening. And it is very frustrating for us from the civil society, because you can either rely on some leaked information from someone who is in there, or just, feed the conspiracy theories, or rely on Vučić's media in Serbia, and that's it. So this is something that the EU has to deal with, and something that we asked and hasn't been given to us for 10 years. And they, even from the EU side, there are many people who were part of the process and admit that this was a mistake, not promoting the dialogue, the effects of the dialogue, the success of the dialogue really backfired to the EU, but seemingly they're not learning the lesson.
Yeah. Indeed, Donika. I want to now open the floor for questions and comments from our audience. So if you want to join our discussion please raise your hand now. Otherwise, send us your written questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. In the meantime, maybe I come back to Dragisa to ask about something that Donika said. She suggested that it's very important to detach Serbia from Russia. How do we do that? How can the EU do that, in your opinion?
I know that Donika is very talkative, but it took really a lot of time, much more than we agreed at the very beginning. She said really a lot of stuff. I would like to comment on something, and including the one that you already mentioned. I mean, detaching Serbia from Russia. Okay, let's see that is happening. What will be the next step? how that will solve the problem between Serbia and Kosovo, and why the situation between the relationship between Serbia and Russia is so incremental for the dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo. I don't get it, because we need to solve the issue between Serbia and Kosovo, no matter of international circumstances. And we know why Serbia is with Russia. I mean, I don't want to go into that details, but it doesn't solve the problem. And if somebody believes the only one problem is Serbia to recognize Kosovo, that is not solving the solution. We had 2013 agreement, which supposed to integrate Serbian population in the north to the rest of Kosovo. Me, myself, I couldn't get Kosovo ID card for 5 years. And at the end of the day, it was ULEX who had to intervene for myself. But they didn't intervene for my wife or for my children. My neighbors, none of the marriages of Serbs from Kosovo, including Serbs from non-Kosovo, it's not registered into Kosovo system. We don't have the property issue. We cannot convert property that we had into the Serbian system to the property that we have in Kosovo system. Speaking about, it's very interesting when Donika mentioned parallel structures. I don't know what does it mean. If we are talking about parallel police structures, these are dismantled. So there are no parallel police structures anymore in Kosovo or judiciary. But if we are talking about education and health institutions, these are the crucial institutions for the Serbs, many Albanians, and non-minorities in Kosovo. As you know, we have parallel education, which means that Serbs from northern Kosovo and in other Kosovo communities, they go into Serbian schools. That was also predicted by the Ahtisaari's plan. So, and that is something that is included in the Association of Serbian Majority Municipalities. So, for instance, we have a hospital in Mitrovica running. They under the Serbian government, they all have Serbian plates. If we are talking about car registration issue, these hospitals, they cannot re-register their cars into Kosovo plates until there is no Association of Serbian Majority Municipalities through which these institutions will be part of, and then there will be possibility to re-register on these institutions. So the problem is not so technical. In this particular situation, Kurti, of course, Kurti's government, they cannot close the hospital in Mitrovica, but they can stop them running in terms of importing the medical instruments and medical supplies. Now they're closing their functioning from moving around because cutting off their car plates. So in principle, okay, he didn't shut down the hospital, but he shut down all the mechanisms for this hospital to function. And speaking about security in the north, I have to say I was in my hometown on Sunday, and there was a special police presence there with heavy armed Humvee vehicles with heavy weaponry on top, and with all these policemen with their weapons in their hands, stopping every car in the middle of the day, stopping every car on a street. And I saw exactly the same situation back in the 90s with Milosevic police. And actually it happened at the very same place. So they're mistreating. We have reports that one guy was beaten the other day. That was not, one guy was beaten on Monday. I saw this is happening on Sunday. I saw it with my eyes. So this is kind of provocation that will lead to a conflict, because the local population will react. At some point, somebody will react. And when they react, I know in Pristina, everyone will say, oh, Vučić is guilty for that. But what about building bases, police outposts on top of Serbian towns and villages in northern Kosovo, which are not in line with the Brussels agreement? Because on the Brussels agreement, we have the agreement on police, Everyone knows what is the role of police in the north. So how come suddenly there is a huge presence of special police forces in the north, permanent presence? They're mistreating people. Nobody is reporting about that. And one other thing, just to say, for Kosovo, and that is being reported. We are doing research on that. For Kosovo, all the agreements are one-off agreements. So, for instance, agreement of judiciary, they implemented in 2016, but now with the new laws and bylaws, they are not implementing the same regulations that are part of the agreement from 2016. It is the same with the police. They said, okay, when it was the time for integrating Serbian policemen into Kosovo policemen, we will implement this agreement, but it will not be a continuous implementation. So basically this agreement of normalization should include these accords from all these agreements to be a permanent one, not to come back, because, and it same happens with the Kosovo constitution for 2008. When Kosovo needed to get Western recognition, they implement all these accords, all this nice stuff about protection of collective rights of Serbian population in Kosovo. But we all know that doesn't implement in practice. I mean, we have a violation of these accords on a daily basis, and this has been reported by many reports, including ones from Human Rights Watch and other international organizations, plus the US, EU reports as well. So yeah, we need what I'm trying to say, and I will finish with that. Without protection of collective rights of Serbian population in the north, or not in the north, in Kosovo, we cannot make any agreement, because the accords that are now in place, they are not functioning. We need new mechanisms. This is according to the EU practices, according to the best models of power sharing and conflict resolution. And without that, we cannot talk about any kind of the normalization agreement within Serbia and Kosovo. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to bring in some of the questions from our audience, because we have a written question and also a hand that has been raised, but I want to press you a bit harder on these new mechanisms, how this new mechanism should look like. And also you said during your first intervention, Dragisa, that we need an agreement. So given how messy this situation is, and it's becoming clear just from the exchange we're having here, what would an agreement entail or look like? What are we even agreeing on? I'm starting to be a little bit confused myself about what are we actually talking about. But these are my silly questions, so points of clarification that I wanted to ask you. I will now read the question from our audience and come back to you before I give Donika the chance to react. So the anonymous attendee who has sent this question is asking, what would be the motivation for Serbia to recognize Kosovo as an independent state if Kosovo is not willing to give anything in return? If the EU membership should be the compensation for recognition of Kosovo, do you think that the EU is ready for enlargement and willing to accept Serbia, or it will require from Serbia to fulfill all other chapters? If it will require Serbia to fulfill other chapters, then why would Serbia recognize Kosovo? So that's the question that we have from our audience. And then we also have one hand up. Marta, do you want to come in at this point before I go back to our speakers?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you both speakers for this very interesting, insightful, and very detailed presentations, and also back and forth debate. It's very interesting to understand both perspectives. I wonder, and I'm changing a little bit the topic here, but I wonder in your perspective, how the recent published enlargement package really addresses all of these questions that you've been discussing and detailing and explaining. And also, I think the second question related to the first one, which is also in line of what Corina has has raised regarding EU mechanisms. Has the Commission and the EU the right tools, mechanisms to deal with this post-conflict or actual conflict context? Yeah, what
Thank you
would,
very much.
how can we better address these issues?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marta. So I come back to Dragisa and then I'll go to Donika.
Okay, I will try to be very short. I'm trying to find, yeah, this is the question. Well, I agree with the question. What is the motivation of Serbia to recognize Kosovo in these circumstances? And what is under my understanding, the Scholz-Macron initiative, which is not an old initiative. I also wrote a policy paper, which is very much in line with what we've heard about this initiative, is that Serbia will not recognize now Kosovo. It will be the agreement without recognition. And then later on, when Serbia gets into EU, they will recognize Kosovo, which is something that was promised as a framework of the agreement back in 2013. So that is nothing new. It could be a good mechanism to move things forward. And in that sense, let's see and let's wait for this paper of Scholz and Macron, whether this is really included inside or not.
But wait a second, if Serbia gets in, what motivation would it have then to recognize Kosovo, especially if unanimity stays in place and decisions on enlargement and on any other issues linked to foreign policy are happening by unanimity? So how would this be any solution?
I didn't understand. What you mean if Serbia gets in and not without recognizing Kosovo? That is your question.
Yeah, you said that there will be agreement without recognition, and recognition would occur after accession of Serbia.
No. Recognition
Okay,
will definitely come with the accession of Serbia. That is, we all know that. I mean, we know German 7 points from 2011, I believe, or 2000 from early 2000s. Which says that Serbia cannot get into EU without recognizing Kosovo. So we know that one. But since Serbia will not get into EU for the next 10 years, probably, with this enlargement process, God knows when. So in that sense, it is more feasible that Serbia will recognize Kosovo on the day of enlargement or one day before, but not before that, not within this initiative. I have to remind you that there is no political and societal factor in Serbia that even considers, not to say supports, Serbian recognition of Kosovo. So we are talking not only about position and opposition parties, we are talking about the church, academia, businesses, everyone. So 80% of Serbian population does not support Serbia to recognize Kosovo. So in this kind of circumstances, no matter whether Vučić is on power or anyone else is in power, nobody will make that decision. But that is, so to expect Serbia to recognize Kosovo in a foreseen future is impossible. I mean, it's naive. On the other side, if we don't have any kind of the agreement, we will have the war. And now everyone is aware of that. So either we will have some sort of the agreement which will allow Kosovo to maybe to join UN. That depends from Russia, so we don't know. But it will support. It will help Kosovo to start with the EU enlargement. It will support Kosovo to get recognition from 5 non-recognizers and to join NATO. So I think it's a good position for Kosovo as well. They will not get maybe recognition from Serbia, and they will not get. Maybe they will not get the UN seat, but they will get everything else. So in that sense, I believe it is feasible to have some sort of the agreement. What was your next question for?
Well, on the mechanisms, if the EU has proper mechanisms, but I guess indirectly you've answered that.
EU does not. I have to say that EU does not have the proper mechanisms. One problem of the EU is lack of ownership. Not lack of ownership of the negotiation process, but lack of ownership of the reached agreements. Nobody monitors the agreements that has been reached. And we have been discussing with Lajčák about it. For instance, Serbia has this chapter 35. In chapter 35, which is signed by all, it's a joint common position of the European Union, which means of all member states, even non-recognizers. And there, in this chapter 35, there are clear benchmarks saying what Serbia has to do. Nobody is doing monitoring of these benchmarks. Even some of them are outdated anyway. They're not relevant anymore. Some of them were not relevant when they were put on a paper. But nobody is looking into implementation of the agreement, and that is a problem of credibility of the process. So you are trying to renegotiate, you are trying to negotiate new agreements, but nobody knows what is happening with something that has been agreed. And there is another thing I want to mention for this progress report. I don't know whether you read it comparatively, the ones from Serbia, ones from Kosovo on a dialogue issue, and these two are identical. And I will just put two remarks. They're more on a negative side, they put more pressure on Kosovo than on Serbia, mainly because of not allowing to organize the collection of votes for referendum and for Serbian elections. So that is a criticism on the Kosovo side. And then you have one very interesting point, which says that Serbia has to do everything in order to open the bridge in the north of Mitrovica, which means that you put the pressure on Serbia to solve some local issue, which is actually a communal issue for Mitrovica North. So there is no pressure for, I don't know, authorities in northern Mitrovica or authorities in Kosovo or trying to push them together to solve this issue. Somehow you involved the European Commission with their report, they involved Serbia to solve this issue. So when we see that involvement of Serbia in Kosovo is maybe not recommended, why European Commission is asking Serbia to solve such a minor communal problem.
Okay, somebody should write about all these things, so the Commission is aware of all these problems.
Seemingly they are aware because, I mean, knowing how much Lista Srpska is linked directly to Vučić and how every decision that is taken, even at the level of local issues, is being discussed in Belgrade with Vučić, I guess Commission hit right to the point. It is actually, you know, that the political decision has to come from Belgrade in order for that to happen in northern part of Kosovo, which basically describes the situation there. I mean, it is very sad to see how the local Serbs in the north are living, being caught between both the governments here in Pristina and the one in Belgrade. I've been witnessing a lot of war declaration from both sides, counting both on NATO, which is counting on NATO to actually halt it because obviously he can't afford any other war with NATO. And then, of course, the one in Kosovo not being able to do anything security-wise there, basically calling NATO to increase their presence in the north in order to offer safety and security in that part of Kosovo. So honestly, I'm very disappointed to see how much, you know, the dialogue. Probably in 2013, it was a good idea to be linked to the integration of Serbia and to some extent of Kosovo, because this has proven to be wrong. I mean, the fact that Vučić is really keen to keep Kosovo until the very last day before entering the EU, it means that it's keeping it as for a bargaining power, and that is very bad sign for democracy, because clearly there is Kosovo issue being kept there to negotiate stability versus democracy with the EU. And this is something that hasn't worked until now and won't work in the future. So if we fall in this stability trap in the future as well, this is not going to help any other person in Serbia nor Kosovo, especially those in the north. As for the mechanisms I mentioned in the beginning, I mean, there is no leverage for Vučić to solve the issue. even if today the government of Kosovo does, implement the association and everything, there will be something else that Vučić will find to block the process, because there is no political will from his side. Of course, the Russian role is very important, because the narrative that there is going to be war in the north of Kosovo was clearly something that Russia played with during the last issue that we had in the north. I mean, there were like Telegram images and screenshot posted about specifically this issue, trying to portray yet another war in the Balkans between the West and the East or whatever. So that is wrong as well. This is why Vučić needs Russia, and that's why Russian presence will not allow this party to move forward in the process, but also in the EU integration process in general. As for the mechanisms, I believe that the EU should really know the leverage that they have in the region. It is really sad to have power and not realize that you have power and not use it. So leverage, yes, there is of the EU, and most of it is related to funds. Most of it is related to the support that the EU gives to both Kosovo and Serbia and to the region. And in general, they should understand that they have more leverage than they think. But then who is the EU, and what kind of strategy the EU has, and what kind of future the EU wants to see itself, but also if it wants to see the region in it as well, and how it wants to see the region in it, then it's another issue. That's why I said it's not between Kosovo and Serbia. It's definitely more. It's definitely geopolitical. It really proves that the EU, answering to Marta's question, does not have power, but does not even know how to navigate in post-conflict regions. It believed that they could just replicate whatever they used in Central Eastern European, and believing that it's going to be effective in the Balkans as well, which wasn't the case, and obviously proved it wrong for the past. In the past 20 years. No mechanisms. The country reports are just repetition, copy and paste, something that we have seen before. It had a tendency to really portray the EU that as it, the process is really under control, and it has been going on. There have been meetings, but nothing has happened in these meetings, and that's why we are having the situation that we are having now. So also the EU should stop sugarcoating things and really get real in pushing both sides and really using the leverage strategically and long term, not short term ad hoc conflict prevention style, because that's not going to work.
Well, if we can maybe take a few more minutes of your time before we close, I maybe want to ask very briefly and ask you kindly also to be brief in your responses about the role of the US, because it was brought a little bit up in your interventions, and I wonder if we can elaborate a little bit about how the US and EU can work better in helping with this situation. But then I also wanted to mention, and please feel to cherry pick, 3 other questions that were sent by the same participant in our chat box, asking what sort of collective rights of Serbs would you say are essential, Dragisa? What part can or should the past collective crimes committed who have not been accounted for fully judicially play in an agreement, or the question of reparations or an apology often posited? And finally, the German-French framework puts in each scenario the possible recognition of the 5 remaining non-recognizers on the table. How can we or the other parties, Kosovo and Serbia, be sure they really are in the boat? Cherry pick 1 minute per person if possible, and then we will close.
Corina, what was your first question? Sorry, I didn't write.
Role of US, yes.
Role of US. Okay, I'll be very short. First, role of US, very positive. It is absolutely positive that they harmonize their activities with Miroslav Lajčák. So this is kind of approach that has been produced very good results so far, and they should continue this way. So I'm really positive on that. Second, these 3 questions from Mr. Mustafa. First, what sort of collective rights? I've been advocating for the autonomy for the Serbs in the north and cultural autonomy or non-territorial autonomy in the south. We have European solutions in that. in that segment. So that is absolutely something that is needed for the final normalization process, but not to be at the expense of Kosovo statehood. So we are not talking here about Republika Srpska, which is something completely different constitutional arrangement. We are talking here about the third layer of the government, which is for protecting collective rights of the Serbs. And without that, I don't see any point of any agreement. The second part is war crimes and all issues that goes with that. I personally believe that we might sign the agreement of the normalization, but we cannot do anything on reconciliation without unveiling what was happening in Kosovo on both sides. And that's absolutely priority for a reconciliation process between Albanians as a nation and Serbs as nations. And German-French initiative is more about 5 non-recognizers and giving the enough credibility and for 5 non-recognizers to recognize Kosovo, then about final settlement between Kosovo and Serbia. So we should read in that regard, in that matter, we should read this initiative. And I think that every side should use this opportunity to go forward, embracing this initiative. And I'm quite sure that 5 non-recognizers will be happy about it, if the agreement is reached.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Donika, your final words.
Yes, good. On US also and EU being on the same page, we did not have that with the previous administration. This is rather positive because it doesn't really allow the political elites to create fissures also between the both. The role of the UK is so because of you know, they have a person appointed, but then the issues then within the UK are not going that well to have political capital to invest in it. In the region. I mean, yes, the role of US-UK is important, but it's because the region has been securitized, and it's also, again, you know, going to the security reasoning behind this intervention rather than it's something that will be flourishing for the democracy of the region first. 5 non-recognizers and the German French non-paper, yes, you know, like, but they are not the only problem that Kosovo will have. I mean, Macedonia, North Macedonia has been recognized and still had a lot of issues with NATO because of you know, the name issue with Greece and also the EU a path for the Western Balkans does not seem to be easy after setting the precedent with the case of Bulgaria against North Macedonia. So I'm not saying that it's not relevant, but it's not really gonna create any conducive environment in Kosovo for it to function internally, but also for the region to actually be better off in the future. The 5 non-recognizers shouldn't even link their decision to the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia, because that's bilateral between them and Kosovo, and not really try to put everything in one basket, which is dialogue, and then not be able to solve anything. I do agree in principle with the fact that now is the time to actually move on, and now it's time to actually sanction those who are unwilling to do so, being either Kosovo or the government of Serbia. And this is something that I liked from Escobar's interventions, because obviously it looks like it is now or never, take it or leave it. And this is really something that we need, because if it's up to us, we will never solve it, because we would really want to talk, you know, 20 more years about the technicalities of all sorts and not really move on. Yes, I'm really hoping that now the governments will really sit and talk seriously about the final solution. Won't lose any time, because I think it's the right momentum now, especially with the problems that Russia has with itself, and not really too much energy to meddle and support autocrats in the region.
Thank you so much. We can only hope so. We hope that they will listen and follow in the footsteps of your suggestions. I want to thank you so much for this fascinating exchange. It was absolutely enlightening for me. And I hope that the audience has also appreciated. Many thanks. This is a subject on which we will continue to work, and I look forward to our next exchange. In the meantime, thank you to you, thank you to our participants, and have a wonderful Thursday afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.